Ignition sequence start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff.
LUMA, the Lunar Museum of Art, is a digital museum and archival initiative focused on the intersection of art, space, and technology. It presents curated exhibitions, immersive galleries, and projects that explore humanity's cultural expansion beyond Earth. LUMA is also a leader in integrating NFTs and digital storytelling into space-themed experiences. The museum offers virtual exhibitions centered on space history, human imagination, and frontier themes, including art sent to the moon and space and digital physical artworks launched into orbit and beyond. NFT collections are tied to cosmic narratives, as well as collaborations with astronauts, engineers, and artists such as the Space for Art Foundation, and archival cinema experiences featuring space-themed films and documentaries. My guest on this edition of the Journal of Space Commerce podcast is Michael Potter, one of the founding trustees of the Lunar Museum of Art. Michael, it's great to have you back.
Hey, Tom, thanks so much, and really enjoyed being back.
Is LUMA a physical museum, a virtual experience, or somehow some kind of hybrid, and how is that changing?
Well, that's a great question, and it's a kind of a central question to everything we do and everything we think about. So, just to introduce the cast of characters, we have Intuitive Machines, which is the publicly traded company out of Houston, Texas, that actually made the lunar lander that landed on the moon. And then separately, we have another private company called Lonestar, which is the first private data server on the moon. And then we are a digital layer on top of the Lonestar data server. So from a practical point of view, the initial museum, we're the first museum on the moon, we're the first nonprofit museum on the moon, first art museum on the moon. But to get a start, we had to do it in a digital context because that was all that was available to us at that moment. But the idea is that this is really a hybrid museum. And, maybe during this podcast, we can talk a little bit about one of the initiatives, which is a network called the Museums of the Next Frontiers. And it's a network with other art museums. And one of the challenges that art museums have is, number one, you want to reach a younger audience. You want an opportunity to democratize art, to try to get art out to more people. And oftentimes, art museums are really, really great at art, but maybe not as strong in terms of science, technology, and space. And so one of the things that we're trying to work with our museum partners on is to try to leverage those aspects of art and space.
Let's go ahead and talk about that network a little bit. Just describe that to me and tell me what it's all about.
Yeah, so the first thing is that when people, first of all, a lot of people, when you say, hey, we're running the first museum on the moon, people say, that's amazing.
Yeah, right.
How do you go about thinking about that? And I think like one of the first motivations that we had was we really wanted to view this as an embassy, the first embassy for the creatives of mankind. And so it's this kind of very aspirational kind of spirit that we had, which is how do you, and Tom, I know we've spoken in the past about the power and the urgency of making humanity a multiplanetary species. But part of humanity venturing to become a multiplanetary species is celebrating art and culture. So that's something we're very, very passionate about. When we launched the LUMA, the Lunar Museum of Art, in February on top of Intuitive Machines, it was such an exciting moment. And, it's almost hard to explain to your listeners kind of the excitement. And if some of your listeners haven't had the privilege of attending a rocket launch, any rocket launch, I highly recommend them doing that. I was on the way to one of our museum partners, the Booth Museum, which is located in Cartersville, Georgia. always rated one of the top museums in the United States by USA Today. Amazing museum. And if people haven't been to Cartersville, north of Atlanta, Georgia, highly encourage. They've recently trademarked the slogan, Museum City USA. They have 4 museums in a relatively small town. I was on my way to Cartersville to the Booth Museum, and they publicly came out as our first museum partner. And so they're the first anchor partner in the museums in the next frontier. But again, the challenge that we're presenting to museum partners is technology is moving so rapidly. AI technology, virtual technology, and the question is like, how as a museum, and if your mission statement as a museum is to try to get the best curators to focus on the kind of brick and mortar stuff that you do every day as a museum, it's hard to keep up with space. It's hard to keep up with virtual reality. It's hard to keep up with some things like NFTs and other sorts of things, and even just the science aspect. It's interesting because a lot of times people put creativity in one silo and they put science and engineering in another silo. My personal experience is that there's a lot of natural crossovers between the two. If you look at most Nobel laureates, they happen to be very, very creative people. Yeah, they're great. They're genius scientists, or they're genius, kind of engineers or bioengineers or whatever. But a lot of them are incredibly creative. So we try to bring that to kind of our brick and mortar museum partners.
So then how does LUMA define the role of, because you mentioned this, the role of creativity in shaping humanity's off-world future?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing is that a lot of space travelers, astronauts and cosmonauts, when they first go to space, they have this epiphany. It's almost a religious experience. They call it the overview effect, where they see the thin blue line of the atmosphere and they realize, how vulnerable the Earth is, how special it is. And I think that allowing creatives to dream about kind of this more universal aspiration of art and creativity, it's super magical and just gives everyone a different perspective. And I think it's not just the creatives, but also people who appreciate the art.
Now, who are the key people behind LUMA's founding, and what impact do you hope to have on the space industry's next era?
Yeah, so Richard King, who runs King Arts, and he's the representative for Tom Gillian, who's the highest grossing auction contemporary Western artist. He has Richard brings so much museum experience, gallery experience, art experience, and John Morris is based out of London in the United Kingdom. John is, a multi-tech startup entrepreneur, but has a lot of experience with creatives, with art, with NFTs and kind of other aspects of the things that the museums of the next frontier and LUMA think about. John Giza, who's based out of Los Angeles, is the curator for the museum, and so. When we talk maybe later in the podcast about the different galleries, we curate and recurate our exhibits, and so it's probably one of the most important aspects of what we do. And John Giza heads that up.
We a couple of years ago did a podcast with Frank White, who wrote the book The Overview Effect. And if folks really want to get a better idea about that, I'd recommend they go back and listen to that podcast, because it was a very fascinating conversation. Let's talk a little bit about how LUMA archives art for preservation rather, in digital and cosmic formats.
So, the first thing is that in conjunction with Lonestar, the first private server on the moon, and and just a kind of a parenthetical comment about that. One of and I know we've talked about the geopolitical race for AI superintelligence, which looks a lot like the space race, which was a geopolitical during the Cold War. But one of the challenges with servers and with AI is that there's just a lot of concerns about whether there's enough power on Earth to power all that, and also the environmental impact. So there's a huge logic in using space to solve earthbound problems. And obviously Starlink solves the earthbound problem of connectivity. Lone Star solves the problem about backing up critical data off Earth, and doing so while not polluting the Earth, because we get solar power and the cooling from space. So there's a lot of logic. There's a lot of logic in those aspects of it. So initially, this vision, which was this kind of digital vision, and in conjunction with Lone Star, the first commitment was to do a humanitarian curation of several galleries with LUMA on the moon. And the way we did that is we reached out to a number of artistic communities. And just as an example, one of the communities we reached out to was an Afghani oppositional movement to the Taliban that had recently had a museum showing in Germany. So we ended up curating the best of that museum artwork, and we took that in an archival context to the moon. Separately, LUMA has recreated a museum in cyberspace that feels like you're viewing a museum on the moon. And so that museum, we have then recurated the work that we have brought to the moon, and we've recurated that so when people enter our museum, the museum that feels like you're touring a museum on the moon, that you have that opportunity. So this initial mission was largely humanitarian. So reaching out to those communities to exhibit their artwork. It is worth noting that the very first gallery, Gallery 1 in LUMA, is the best of NASA images. So we went through, NASA has millions and millions and millions of images. They haven't gone through to try to figure out which are the best. So we've taken the first cut at that. And we've tried to represent those kind of iconic images that, that have made NASA successful and famous. And one of the things you mentioned in the lead-in was that we also have provided a platform for documentary films. We have a cinema on the moon, on LUMA, and anybody today can go to luma.org. So it's LUMAA. We actually have two A's.org, and you can enter the virtual gallery, and you can go to the cinema and you can watch a number of films for free today. You can do that immediately, and then you could peruse the rest of the other four galleries, which as I described, has kind of what we call the first artist, as well as the NASA artist, as well as the gallery. And one of the first items that you see, which I think is quite interesting and quite compelling, is when you come into the virtual museum, there is a 3D representation of the server, which is the Lone Star server. That server was designed by the world famous Danish architect Bjarke Ingels. His firm goes by the letters BIG, and when the sun hits the server from an angle, one particular angle, you see on the moon, you see the shadow of one of our Apollo moonwalkers, Charlie Duke. And when the sun hits it from the other angle, the shadow on the moon is of a female astronaut, which is Nicole Stott. So and that's the beautiful server that you see when you come directly into the Lunar Museum of Art, and then you can travel to the other galleries and explore.
Clear something up for me. When people visit the Lunar Museum of Art online, are they connecting to the server on the moon, or is it housed here on Earth?
So it's a great question. So all the images are archived on the moon, but because the United States doesn't have continuous bandwidth to lunar landers or lunar rovers, we've had to. Phase 1 is kind of store and forward. So that's why we've recreated the museum in virtual space, and then they have that experience like they're on the moon. They see the art that is physically on the moon in a digital format. And eventually, and I know we talked about this in the past, which is, the possibility of turning the International Space Station into a museum in the future. We're part of a campaign, SOS, Save Our Station, and the nonprofit organization, the Institute of Space Commerce, has been a pioneer in that. But on a weekly basis, LUMA expresses its support also for turning the space station into a physical museum, which will have a virtual component because
Right.
the average person on the Earth won't be able to experience, but they can experience it through cameras that will be run and powered by solar panels and connected through bandwidth that exists today.
My guest is Michael Potter, a founding trustee for LUMA, the Lunar Museum of Art. And we'll get right back to the conversation. But first, please take a moment to click subscribe to be sure you don't miss any of our podcasts, or if you're watching on YouTube, any of the videos from Xterra Media. And please consider becoming a paid subscriber. Whether you're a space professional, investor, or enthusiast, paid subscribers have first access to premium articles and podcasts focused on the new space economy. Just visit www.xterrajsc.com and help keep the Journal of Space Commerce independent as we chronicle, cajole, and, when necessary, critique the commercial space industry. Let's move over to the NFTs, Michael, and talk about how LUMA incorporates NFTs, XR, or the blockchain into the exhibitions.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because I think on a previous show we had talked about space debris and using blockchain as a potential tool as trying to commercially incentivize people to clean up debris. But blockchain is a great tool that can be used for tackling many of humanity's greatest challenges. NFTs have had kind of a bad reputation. They ran into a reputational challenge when NFT bubble kind of deflated. But I think for museums around the world, it becomes part of their kind of gift shop experience is to provide those people that are interested in that and artwork that can be protected and certified by sort of blockchain and NFT. But there are many, many other options in the gift shop. So it's just kind of whatever the consumers want, they ought to be able to have those choices.
So for those who might not be as familiar with the terminology, what exactly is an NFT? I know it stands for non-fungible token, but that's about as far as my knowledge goes.
No, that's exactly right. And it is kind of a digital crypto asset. There's a service that's a lot like Amazon or eBay, which is called OpenSea, which is where a lot of the NFT artwork kind of exists and where it's available. Today through LUMA, we have some limited art that is available, digitally available. And so it's interesting because we literally have museum art in museums today, which are digital NFT artwork. And the other thing for people to remember, and again, creativity is the only limitation that people may have. But we're seeing some beautiful, beautiful artwork in museums, and often and some of the great examples that I've seen recently where they've used large monitors to have kind of very vibrant art. And these are limited series. And so even in the museum world, if there is a top artist that says, hey, I'm doing a limited run of 4 or 5 of these digital exhibitions, there's a tremendous amount of appeal because, they're leading artists, they're visually captivating. And some of the critiques in some of the more traditional museums is that sometimes there's just a consistency of color and tone, and particularly in certain genres of art. And it's incredibly compelling when you get to the end of an exhibit and you just see something that is just so powerful and so vibrant with some movement to it. And so I think that we're going to continue to see that model be a great model. And and that should not be overshadowed by the previous deflation of the NFT bubble that so many people have heard about, because there are legitimate art with legitimate uses for that. And I think one of the other things, and I think, even under the particular government funding environment, museums are increasingly getting under more and more pressure. And so the question is, how do they continue to reach, kind of marginalized communities and difficult to get to locations? And part of that is this kind of digital footprint, this digital platform, and that includes these monetization efforts that these museums are now faced with. And so the museums themselves have to be more creative and have more options in terms of monetizing their gift shops and bringing in more revenue, particularly in the climate of government cuts.
Well, and that begs an interesting question, because you said you're a nonprofit. How do you fund what it is that you're doing?
Yeah, so, and it's a great question. I mean, nonprofits run into the same challenges that all organizations have, which
I've often said a nonprofit business is still a business.
yeah, and I think, one of the, classic example is National Geographic, right? They have a lot of commercial products and commercial gift shops, and that's how they remain sustainable as a nonprofit organization. So most successful non all successful nonprofits have to have a sustainable business model. Even the Red Cross, I mean, billions of dollars of revenue,
Right.
but they kind of have a solution, and they have kind of a built-in customer base.
Let's talk about those galleries. It sounds like there's several things that people can go and virtually walk through. So walk us through those galleries.
Yeah, so the first one is the best of NASA. And so we had fun, trying to select these iconic images from NASA, and we brought them to the moon, which was tremendously satisfying, and for a relatively small nonprofit organization to do that, even NASA hasn't been able to really accomplish that in the past. Gallery number two is focused on space for art. And that's that remarkable nonprofit run by astronaut Nicole Stott. And she works with pediatric cancer patients. It's one of her most important missions that she's ever done in her life. And she goes into these pediatric cancer hospitals, and she gives the patients a piece of white material to paint on. And that white material looks like canvas, but in reality, it's real spacesuit material. They create these kind of American quilt style spacesuits, and they send those up to the space station. Astronauts put them on, and then they show the children through video connection, this is your artwork. It's a super powerful, super inspiring organization that she runs, and we're just honored that we could showcase some of her great work. The third gallery is the cinema, which we've talked about, and the fourth gallery, we call it the next frontiers, and it's interesting for us. And maybe this is the lens. I spend most of my time in Wyoming, and a frontier state. We think about the American frontier, but for us, the Lunar Museum of Art is obsessed with the next frontiers, and for us, that includes space, but it also includes technology like virtual reality, and all aspects of kind of cyber and AI, of course. And then we have a gallery 5 for the first artist. And this was part of the curated gallery that we did kind of based on a humanitarian effort at reaching out to the Afghanis. We've reached out to that we have artists representing the Republic of Georgia. We have artists from the Middle East. We have African American artists. We have Native American artists. On the next frontiers, one of the pieces of work that really resonate with me is that first Native American astronaut, Commander John Harrington, took this, in my view, a very iconic image, a photograph of an Indian flute that's floating, and also a feather. And it's just a kind of a beautiful composition in zero gravity. And that's one of the exhibits that people see in the next frontier. So there's just a lot for people to poke around with and see. And one of the things that we're in internal beta on is an artificial intelligence docent and curator, so that people, when they visit the museum, that you can say, hey, I only have 15 minutes. I just want to see the highlights, or I want to learn more about this artist, or why is this artwork controversial? Could you please tell me that? And the AI docent and the AI curator will be able to give you information about that.
So then how do you choose the artists or stories you want to feature in the exhibitions?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. We have an internal curation team, and we have kind of an internal philosophy statement that we have as we're guided through this. And it literally has to tick a handful of boxes.
Right.
So, I mean, but most importantly, on the humanitarian mission, the first mission, the humanitarian mission, it had to certainly tick that box. And secondly, we were interested in those pieces of artwork that were compelling and provocative. So that was important for us. In the case of the Best of NASA, those were images of the millions and millions of images, even though virtually we're as big as MoMA from a museum square footage point of view. We have limited space, so it's hard.
Sure.
How do you reduce it down? And so we're trying to pick those images that are representative, but we think that in some way are iconic, or the images tell an entire story. So that's super important to us. So those are kind of the guiding factors that we looked at in the curation process.
Just a couple of things more, Michael. First of all, speak, if you would, up to your partnership with the Space for Art Foundation or the Moon Village Association.
Yeah, so I will say that the Space for Art Foundation, and again, this is like space to make an impact on Earth and to inspire those on the Earth. For even people who may be a little bit jaded about space, and I'll tell you, one of the things that I find personally sad about the current situation that NASA finds itself in, and part of it I think is self-created, and one of the mantras that I think created this problem is when NASA made the declaration that failure is not an option. It immediately made space boring, because when you do that, it costs tremendous amounts of money. It creates a lot of delays. It takes all the excitement, because if failure is not an option, you eliminate some of the excitement. And if you said, like, in Formula One racing, failure is not an option. Well, people watch Formula One racing because
for the crashes.
Yeah, and also
exactly
failures, right? The failures and setback, even if it's just a mechanical failure, right?
Right.
It's not, then it's a lot of excitement. And I can tell you, in the public events that we've done with Space for Art or with the Lunar Museum of Art, just the element of excitement is palatable. And I think that's the challenge that we bring back to NASA, is to say, you've lost this, let's bring it back. And so Space for Art, which is, these kids who are suffering from cancer, these are the hardest moments in their life. It's the hardest moments in the life of their families. And to then have the family or the kids be able to go to Mission Control Center in Houston, or to be able to connect with these astronauts virtually, there's even for the coldest and hardest people, I mean, these are tear-jerking moments. And I think the other thing is, it's like, oftentimes we talk about great teachers or great professors. Great professors are learning every day from their students.
Right.
And I think that when you have a platform like Space for Art, the wisdom that you learn from these young kids it comes out of nowhere, comes out unexpectedly, and is life-changing. So, there's so much humility connected with that. And so, I think that's part of space, which is space ought to teach us about humility, and it ought to teach us about aspiration. It ought to teach us about dreams. And that's everything that we're trying to recapture that, NASA had in the glory days. And just through, institutionalization and bureaucratization, they've lost some of that magic and beauty. And we want them to bring it back.
Just one thing more, and this is going to be kind of a long question, because when they talk about the new space stations that are coming online and the experiential aspect of what it's going to be like for people who are living and working in these space stations, that they want it to feel more comforting, I guess, is about the best word, because as we all know, the ISS is a very mechanical kind of place. I think they're looking for these commercial space stations to maybe not be quite as mechanical as the government one. So then how is LUMA preparing for the cultural infrastructure of future space stations, or maybe even a lunar base?
Yeah, so for us, we're always going to push the envelope. So the very first, phase one, we could only do digital. Phase two, we'd love to be part of the ISS being turned into a museum, providing exhibits, providing connectivity, providing a platform. But we're committed, when the technology catches up, to have the physical museum on the moon. And I think it's important for art to be right alongside of everybody else in this kind of pioneering effort. And you see space and art even on the nose cones of rockets. Oftentimes there'll be art. And I think it's an important space traveler to have the culture. And I think and again, it's like we have to readjust the way we think about if humanity is to become a multiplanetary species, by definition, culture and art has to become multiplanetary. And so we're just part of that effort. And I think that's the weaknesses of all space agencies on the Earth, is that for the most part, they've fallen into this trap where they've become shamelessly obsessed with jobs and kind of industrial protection. And it has nothing to do with space. Whether their missions ever get off the ground, they don't care, because it's did they create 1,000 jobs? We got to go back to the basics, which is, how do you become a multiplanetary species? And how do we do planetary backup, where we're able to back up human culture? Because if we ever get taken out by an asteroid, all of humanity disappears. We want humanity to be backed up in the cosmos.
For somebody to find from wherever they may be.
For somebody to find. So that's part of the insurance policy. And it's not, it's not like a light switch. I mean, it's going to be maybe multi-generational to have that planetary backup. But that's what we live our life for.
When we've talked about space tourism, it was often mentioned that you don't have to travel in space to experience space tourism. And this is just one aspect of that. It's something that a way that people can experience space without actually being able to go, which unfortunately most of us are not going to be able to have that experience.
It's a democratized platform for space inspiration and space art and space culture.
Michael, it's been great. I enjoyed talking with you again, but we are out of time. So thanks so much. I appreciate your time this time.
Tom, thanks for taking the time out. Really appreciate it.
Michael Potter is a founding trustee for the Lunar Museum of Art. Well, that's going to do it for this edition of the Journal of Space Commerce podcast, a production of Xterra Media. The executive producers are Mike Turner and Tom Patton, with production assistance from Debbie Turner. You can subscribe to the audio version of the podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many other popular podcasting platforms. Be sure to click subscribe so you don't miss any of our podcasts or any of our other videos. You can get daily updates on space commerce by subscribing to the Journal of Space Commerce on Substack at www.xterrajsc.com. You can connect with us on LinkedIn and follow us on X at xterrajsc. And please consider becoming a paid subscriber. Whether you're a space professional, investor, or enthusiast, paid subscribers have first access to premium articles and podcasts focused on the new space economy. Just visit xterrajsc.com and help keep the Journal of Space Commerce independent as we chronicle, cajole, and, when necessary, critique the commercial space industry. Until next time, I'm Tom Patton. Thanks for joining us.
I wanna go faster, faster. Hands in the air, we're gonna crash. search, searching for the answers. Like Galileo, through his looking glass, thirst for reason. A dreamer's eyes we gaze into a sense of purpose, known by few. Like finding water on the moon.